Hey guys, welcome to the Centre Bounce. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about Freo, how they went in 2022, and how we think they're going to go in 2023. Hope you enjoy. In today's episode, we're joined by Damo. How you doing, Damo?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Nice rainy day in Melbourne, so it's supposed to be summer, and I got drenched this morning, so that's always fun. How's it going where you are?
It is very hot outside, so we're getting the full experience of summer, which is fantastic. The aircon and the fan is going, as you can probably see up behind me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nah,
It's
I miss the sun.
yeah, very very hot here at the moment. Going to be hot all week, including Christmas. So spending lots of time inside with the aircon.
Hey, apart from power bills, it sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Just for those who don't know who you are, before we get into the team reviews, just kind of introduce yourself.
Yeah, because as you said, my name's Damo. I do content for the Jock Reynolds Supercoach community. I also do a little bit of Supercoach stuff for the Herald Sun, and I've been featured on Overnight Crowd for SEN. I'm a massive Freo fan, that's why I'm here. But I also cover things like the BBL as well.
Nice. So you'd be the one to talk to about kind of a fan's a point of view of how Freo's going, right?
I'd hope so. That's why I'm here, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. How do you feel that Freo's 2022 season went? Before we kind of go into ladder position and things like that, do you feel like they lived up to expectations? Do you feel like maybe you guys got more wins than what you were thinking? What's kind of your feeling about the team at the moment?
I think they exceeded expectations. To be honest, I mean, no one really knew how they would end up after their departures of last season. Obviously losing Adam Chera, first season where there hasn't really been COVID around. Justin Longmuir's first, you could argue, first proper season in charge of a travel schedule, all that sort of thing. So it kind of exceeded expectations a little bit in terms of where they finished, how they performed, some of the results that they got. But then there was also some disappointing moments where they couldn't adjust to weather conditions. Some players went down in opportune moments that they couldn't really cover for at the time. But it also opened up opportunities for other players to come in and make a debut and then set the world on fire a little bit.
Obviously, the hubs and a lot of the travel was, I guess, Eastern States based. Do you feel like, last year and the year before that really affected the team a little bit more than, say, this year? Obviously, traveling and going back home, that kind of thing.
I think, funnily enough, I feel like 2021 affected the team more than 2020 did. In 2020, they were in Queensland and had to stay in Queensland, so they adjusted to the conditions pretty quickly and were able to play without traveling. And then in the later half of the season, they were able to go back to WA and stay in WA and have a block of games there. Whereas in 2021, they were never sure where they were going to play the next game because there were lockdowns in random states. They even had to play a home game at the MCG against Carlton, which isn't really a home game when it's against Carlton. So I think 2020 was better for the team than 2021 was, but they still performed quite well in both seasons considering the conditions.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess with a younger team too, like more experienced players that I guess are more used to like the travel and the fatigue you get from that, right? Whereas a younger team like Freo were a bit harder to deal with.
Yeah, and I mean, the Dockers had gone really hard at the draft the last couple of years, so players were still learning how to be professional footballers and travel and suit up for games every weekend. So the experience will probably fast track some players and probably has already fast tracked some players as 2022 was evidenced in 2022.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's kind of just go into your ladder position. We'll have to talk about some of the games. So, in 2022, you guys were fifth. I guess that was from an outsider's perspective. The WA teams maybe aren't as rated in Victoria, but as we spoke about it, like maybe exceeded expectations, that kind of thing a little bit. where did you guys see? Where did you think that you would end up on the ladder this year?
From the beginning of the season, I always thought that they'd be in that echelon of teams that was fighting for a spot in the 8 right until the end of the year. And for a little while there, where they had some lean sort of patches, where they lost to Sydney, drew against Richmond, I thought maybe that was them sort of sliding a little bit and becoming that team. But then they put some good performances together at the end of the season, especially with that come from behind win against GWS. Made a tough go of it against the Eagles the week before, all that sort of thing. So finishing 5th was actually pretty good, and being able to host an elimination final was probably a big tick in Freo's books and the fans' books. I mean, I had them maybe finishing 7th out of just based on and results at the end of the year falling their way.
Yeah, and it felt a little bit like as well for me. In previous years, obviously Andy Brayshaw's a bit of a gun, right? So you maybe relied on him a little bit too much last year, whereas this year, even games where he got tagged, the rest of the team kind of stood up and helped out. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, this year he did better with the tag than people actually realize. Once he got tagged, he would bring them out to a wing and allow Will Brodie, Caleb Sarong, David Mundy, even Lockie Schultz and Michael Walters had some time in the middle. Those guys were able to sort of take those centre bounces, allowing Brayshaw to sort of detach himself from the shackles. And even though maybe he wasn't as clean with the ball, having such close attention, he was definitely better this year than he has been in previous seasons.
And speaking on Will Brodie, so obviously you guys picked him up from the Suns last year, and anyone who's played Supercoach kind of knows how prolific the rise was, with how well he was compared to when he was at Gold Coast. How much of an impact and kind of feeling and feel the need did he have on the Freo side this year?
Freo has needed a big-bodied mid to go along Fife and Mundy for a long, long time. They kind of had it in Chera before he left. Chera wasn't quite as tall, but he had quite a larger body size. Will Brodie now being 190 centimeters, 90 plus kilos, clearance beast, good with the ball. He was someone who the Dockers really was able to rely upon and allow Nat Fife when fit and David Mundy to spend time forward or back depending on where they needed them, because Mundy obviously 193 centimeters, 592 centimeters. They were able to spend time playing sort of as a key or a third tall sort of post at either end of the ground to give some support based on how the game was going.
Yeah, no, definitely. So really good percentage. So obviously 15 wins, 6 losses and a draw. Really good percentage of 117. And then we had your best performance of the year against the Dogs. So you guys winning by 13 points there. Do you feel like, before we kind of go into the trade and the draft period, do you feel like there's any really big holes this year that maybe you guys needed to fill? Or was it more like the team's performing really well, it's just a development thing, why we didn't, win the finals, but also go higher up on the ladder throughout the season?
We're still searching for that big key forward that can remain fit and provide a target throughout the season. Matt Taberner can't stay fit. Jai Amos is still developing. Josh Tracy is still developing. We lost Rory Lobb, obviously, as we'll go through soon. Yeah. But even he had his hot and cold moments, and there were moments where there was definitely it was definitely very. You could definitely tell that there was no target to kick to in the forward line, because the back line performed well, the midfield performed well, but as soon as it was trying to move forward, trying to get into a scoring position, there was no one to kick to, no one who was a target for them to go for to try and convert a score.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of the AFL, I know with North Melbourne definitely, and a few other teams now with St Kilda, with Ben King going down, a lot of teams are really kind of looking for that key tall and guys who are really influential that way. Do you feel like maybe that's why guys like Griffin Logue, who you'd consider to be a really good defender, were played in the forward line to try and mitigate that a little bit?
Yeah, I think they tried to find a spot for Logue because he was clearly a best 22 player at the time, but there was no spot for him down back, except in some situations where he was able to nullify the likes of a Jeremy Cameron, a Max King, those sorts of players. But then he was able to go up forward and tag the likes of a Stephen May and a Tom Stewart as well. So he had that double-edged sword to him. But when he went down back, it made Fremantle a little bit too tall, and then Brennan Cox or Heath Chapman had to move to the other end of the ground, and it didn't quite work for them. So we'll talk about the trades and the departures soon, but I think Griffin Logue's departure is probably a big one in the scheme of how they played in 2022, but probably simplifies things for their 2023.
Yeah, no, definitely. So just looking at the trade period now, so you had 3 players that came in. Josh Corbett, who was, you'd kind of call a medium tall forward. Obviously, Luke Jackson got poached from Melbourne, so that was a really big acquisition for you guys. And then Jago O'Meara was kind of, I think he was like last day of trade period acquisition as well. How do you feel about those 3 guys coming in? And do they kind of fill needs? I know we talked about getting some more tools in the forward line.
We'll start with Jago O'Meara. Obviously, the retirement of David Mundy leaves a big gaping hole in terms of experience. And Jago O'Meara has a leadership quality about him that means he can go into the centre and provide a bigger body. Even though he's only 184 centimeters, he's built really, really well. And you'll see in photos from training, even when he was at the Hawks, even back when he was still a teenager at Gold Coast, he always had that bigger sort of frame for a guy who was slightly short in stature. So he'll provide really good experience in the absence of David Mundy. And I think he'll have a role where he'll spend some time forward, time in the midfield, but he'll be that sort of change of pace midfielder that can go into the middle and or up forward, depending on how the game is going. Luke Jackson, he's sort of come in as the replacement for Rory Lobb, but not really, because they've said that he could spend time in the middle, even with Sean Darcy rucking. Jackson's ability to perform at ground level and in the air is really, really good for the Dockers, because they needed someone who was athletically gifted to replace some of the players that they lost, like Griffin Logan. Josh Corbett, he's 191 centimeters, so he's taller than you'd expect, but he doesn't play that key forward type role. He's definitely that medium marking target. Bailey Fritsch, I suppose you could also throw Josh Dunkley into the mix for how he played at the Bulldogs kind of player, but he can take the ball at its highest point and is really accurate set shot based on his highlights from the VFL.
Yeah, and he came fairly cheap as well from memory. We'll talk a little bit about Meek and Lobb leaving being kind of your taller players, but do you feel like Jackson coming in helps to mitigate those two? I know that some Lobb for a little bit and Meek did a little bit of that rucking, but also forward. Jackson kind of comes in and be's that guy that can cover both players.
Yeah, I think Jackson gives them a little bit of both. Gives them Rory Lobb up forward, gives them Lloyd Meek as sort of a backup to Sean Darcy. But I think Luke Jackson was going to come in regardless of whether Meek and Lobb went. So he was going to complement those two pieces anyway. So it really came down to how they recruited elsewhere. And Josh Corbett will kind of take away what we lost in Griffin Logue a little bit, being that third tall. But yeah, the loss of Lobb, the loss of Meek could definitely be covered by Luke Jackson.
Yeah, definitely. So just checking out the players who left. So obviously Blake Acres went to Carlton. Rory Lobb to the Dogs. We had Logan Tucker to North, and then Lloyd Meek to the Hawks. So out of those players who've left, who's kind of the biggest player really, who you feel like maybe has left a bit of a hole? From an outside perspective, Rory Lobb being kind of your leading goal kicker would be that player for me.
Yeah, he's probably the one, but with the acquisitions of Jackson and Corbett, and then how they've drafted as well, they've really covered it really quite well. And Lobb going out means they have to rely on Matt Taberner to stay on the field, but it also will probably accelerate the development of the likes of Josh Tracy, Jai Amos, and wouldn't surprise me if Liam Reedy, who they picked up in the rookie draft, is given a chance up forward throughout the year as well.
Okay, no, definitely. How did you feel about Griffin Logan Tucker coming to North? Do you feel like the trade for the future picks was worth it? Were you happy? Obviously, as a North supporter, I'm pretty happy they came across and they feel a need for us.
I don't know where Darcy Tucker would have fit beyond this season. He was slipping down the pecking order. He was stuck at Peel. He was definitely good enough to be an AFL footballer, but clearly didn't fit into the Fremantle system. Happy for him to go. Happy to find his opportunity. Good luck to him. Griffin Logue, you could argue, was kind of surplus to requirements, but as I said, as the season went on, he was definitely best 22. But where he played each game and how he was used each game was kind of complicated, and the loss of him will simplify things for the Dockers in 2023, but probably exposes them if any of their key defenders go down at all throughout the year.
Yeah, it felt like you guys were fairly stacked in that position though. So like Young and Chapman and Luke Ryan and stuff. So like you're saying, surplus player, but good coverage just in case.
Yeah, and there were some people that even thought that he was perhaps more valuable than someone like Alex Pearce, for example, who would constantly go down with shin and ankle injuries throughout the year. But I mean, you're never gonna not play your vice captain due to risk of injury. Every player has risk of injury as soon as they step out onto the field. So Alex Pearce and Brendan Cox are going to be the Dockers' tall defender duo for the next 5-6 years or so. So couldn't hold on to Griffin Logue because he was going to be stuck behind those guys, and he wasn't going to play in the same back line as Heath Chapman and Hayden Young. It would make it way too tall.
Yeah, definitely. So Lloyd Meek leaving, was that a huge loss for you guys? Obviously, it felt like you kind of left a little bit for more opportunity, especially with Jackson coming in.
He was way too good to be stuck at Peel, but he was never going to force his way in front of Luke Jackson or Sean Darcy. So I'm happy for him to leave and take his opportunities. He was one I would have loved to keep, especially after losing Rory Lobb, but he's definitely your traditional ruckman, not a forward. So him moving to another club where he can be that number one ruckman makes a whole lot of sense for him. And in the end, it probably made a whole lot of sense for the Dockers as well.
Yeah. And Blake Acres to Carlton. So I guess he was kind of a bit absent for some of the season and then had some really dominant games. Do you feel like that's kind of a big loss for the team, or you've got guys to cover?
Fremantle has been experimenting with that wing position ever since they lost Ed Langdon and Brad Hill a few years ago. I think that Blake Acres filled that position well in 2022, but he definitely wasn't what the team was after, especially after he came back from injury in the middle of the season. They've drafted quite well to cover that position, but there's also players coming through who could step into that position as well, who can develop probably quicker or into what Justin Longmuir wants, whereas Blake Acres is pretty much the finished product by now. And if that's what Carlton wants on their wing, then they've got exactly what they have read on the tin.
Yeah, definitely. So we had Connor Blakely delisted, Mitch Crowden and Joel Weston. Anyone there who you think maybe was a bit hard done by? I know Blakely's been picked up by Gold Coast.
No, not really. I mean, Crowden and Weston were pretty much the same sorts of players. Bit small, bit of a tackling, small forward kind of thing. Crowden was really well built for his size, but probably a bit too small for AFL. And Joel Weston, again, probably a bit too small for AFL at 173 or 174 centimeters. Small forward, didn't really get a good run at waffle level. When he came into the AFL side, he was clearly too small. I mean, we've seen players like Shai Bolton and all those players that are quite small in size do quite well, but it was going to take a long time for Joel Weston to reach that level, and the Dockers needed players who could go straight away.
Am I mistaken in thinking that West Coast has picked him up as a rookie over the trade period or over the SSP?
No, but his sister plays for their AFLW team.
Okay, fair enough. And then Mundy and Valente leaving. So Valente's probably, a bit hard done by. He was hit by injuries, right?
Yeah, so he had a really strange groin injury when he was drafted, and I think he only ever hit full fitness for a short period throughout 2021, but because of the groin injury, he actually had to adjust his running style and never sort of had that fluid running style ever again. He was the captain for the South Australian under-18s side in his draft year, and he was going to be one of those midfielders that would develop into a big, strong body clearance machine. But because of his groin injury, he could never quite run, never quite get that power again. And I think, unfortunately, retiring was the only option unless he sought proper professional rehab.
Yeah. We'll have a quick chat about David Mundy. Obviously, Freo kind of GOAT and really good player and experience for you guys. Do you feel like he could have gone around another year? And how influential is the loss of kind of him? Is there players who can cover his leadership in the team? Obviously, we've mentioned O'Meara.
Around the club, his leadership there'll be a big hole in his leadership, because in the locker room he was really good value. Got around the younger guys. Was really able to sort of lead by example. As the season went on in 2022, you could tell that he was aging. He wasn't hitting his targets by foot. He was slowing down by hand. He knew how things were going in his head, and you can tell his brain was working every single moment, but couldn't quite get ball to foot or ball to hand as quickly as he previously would. Earlier in the season, he was doing quite well. Later in the season, you could tell that retirement was probably on his mind from a long way out. And I think if he went around for another season, I don't know if he would have seen out the season in the 22.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So probably good finish on a high note, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to see the club make finals, even though they didn't go very far, he was able to experience finals one last time.
Nice. So just looking at the players you guys brought in the draft. So you spent a few trade picks to get the likes of Luke Jackson in. So you kind of hindered with your first round pick there. With pick 33, you guys brought in Hugh Davies, a key defender. Pick 41, you brought in Tom Emmett, a medium forward. Max Noble, a ruck with pick 42. And then former Melbourne player Corey Wagner as well with pick 57. And in the rookie draft, so Liam Reedy and then a couple of Category B rookies there as well. So going into the draft, I guess I'll ask first, what do you feel like your kind of needs were with the team? Was there anyone immediate who you thought, hey, we need to get a forward, that kind of thing? Or are these guys more depth players for you now?
Going into the draft, Fremantle definitely needed a key defender in ruckman. Mm-hmm. So after Darcy and Jackson, they only had Eric Benning, who was still developing, wasn't ready. Eventually, he will become a Paddy Ryder type sort of ruckman when he's fully developed, but definitely isn't the finished product. So if one of them went down, we would have been scrambling for someone to back either Jackson or Darcy up, depending on which other one went down. So picking up Max Noble as well as Liam Reedy was really, really good. Max Noble is a ruckman who's going to be anything. He's the son of Trent Noble, who played for St Kilda and Hawthorn, I believe. So he's got football in his blood, and he's really tall, 207 centimeters, and still growing, but he's really mobile, and he took a massive grab at a Dockers training session the other week. So he knows how to mark the ball at its highest point as well, which is really exciting. And Liam Reedy, he can play forward, and he actually reminds me of David Hale a little bit in the way that he just sort of stands there to mark the ball in the forward line. He sort of that immovable object when the ball comes his way, and he knows that he's going to mark it, which is really, really good. And I can see him, as I said earlier, coming into the 22 stages, because he's ready to go. He's mature age. He's 204 centimeters, 105 kilos or something along those lines. He's ready to go. He's a good set shot, can hold his own in the ruck, and I can see him pushing someone out like Josh Tracy or Jai Amos if they seem to falter and need a bit more development at Peel.
Yeah, it felt like North Melbourne picked up Hamish Free from the WA leagues as well. It feels like those kind of the VFL equivalent in the in WA, produce some really, really good ruckmen. Guys who can come in and actually be pretty influential. Is that fair to say?
Well, you can see with players like Marlon Pickett. Who else has come in recently? I mean, Marlon Pickett's probably the best example at the moment. He's come from the waffle. He's been able to step into step into that team straight away. Tim Kelly as well has come in and made an impact at Geelong and then at West Coast straight away. So I think the waffle is a really good mature age sort of honeypot, and you'll find that lots of the mature ages from the waffle seem to impact sooner than they do if they come from the Sandful or the VFL. And I guess it's because the waffle has distanced themselves so much from what the VFL and what the AFL are doing. They've got their own programs and their own high performance standards.
Yeah. Do you feel like maybe they're a little bit more professional than what like your Box Hill VFL teams are? Or could it be a case of, well, their best 22 is probably going to be the same every week because there's only two clubs coming in and changing things around, being VFL affiliates? That kind of has an impact as well.
Yeah, I mean, in the Waffle and the Sandful are probably more professional organisations than the VFL, given that the VFL has more affiliate sides with players always coming in and out, whereas the Sandful only has to deal with Port Adelaide and Adelaide, and the Waffle only has to deal with West Coast and Fremantle. So I definitely think that's probably makes an impact on it, but there's going to be diamonds in the rough in every competition that isn't the AFL, really.
Yeah. Do any of these players you can kind of see having an immediate impact in the team, or are they kind of play in the reserves and then if there's a spot later in the season that they might come in?
Well, Corey Wagner's 25 turning 26. So I think he's coming in to play that Blake Acres role. He's not quite as tall, but he's got the experience, and his and his work at Port Melbourne really showed that he suited that wing position. Whereas at Melbourne and North Melbourne, he either played across half back or in the forward line. So clearly has found a role for himself on the wing there for Port Melbourne, and that the Dockers liked what they saw. Tom Emmett is a really strong marking medium forward who could maybe find his way in ahead of someone like a Bailey Banfield, and hit the scoreboard a bit more often than Bailey Banfield did. And he's someone who he was battling he battled cancer in his draft year, so he had a bit of a setback there, but he's had a great year for Sturt. And obviously, like I said, with Corey Wagner, the Dockers liked what they saw when he was lining up for Sturt. And Hugh Davies has come in, and he's going to develop behind the likes of Cox and Pearce and Ryan and Chapman and all that, and be their Griffin Logue replacement. So they've pretty much replaced everyone that they've lost.
Has there been any talk over the preseason that's kind of what the club said regarding Corey Wagner?
When they drafted Corey Wagner, they said that he's going to come in and play a role straight away. And what that role is, I'm not sure. But you don't usually draft 26-year-olds to develop in the waffle, because they're pretty much the finished product by then.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So just taking a look at our predictions for 2023. So we had you around the same mark in wins, between 14 and 15, similar to you guys who got 15 this year. Ladder position between 6 and 8. So kind of close to what you were as well, just more depending on how even the top 8 is, that kind of thing. And we had a couple of questions, and I'll put an extra one in here as well. So we've spoken a little bit about Brayshaw. Do you feel like maybe as the midfield's developing and getting stronger, there'll be other players to take the tag away from Brayshaw, or there might be some more players to help support him that way?
I think Brayshaw will get the tag early in the season. It honestly depends on how damaging the other midfielders are, because I think Will Brody, Caleb Sarong will possibly get their share of the tag as well. But we've seen only a couple of teams go for that real hard tag, so I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue for him in 2023, because a lot of the time the tag didn't matter. If when he was tagged, he just took his tagger out of the game. It was basically 21 on 21.
Yeah, it felt a bit like you could see in the Supercoach scoring, for example, like the first half of the game, maybe he'd get like 50 points, 5 or 6, 10 possessions, and then the second half he'd really blow out and go really big. So like you're saying, it takes the other player out of the game or just doesn't care about the tag rate.
Yeah, and I think he's sort of learnt to. I think he's learnt to shake the tag as well throughout the year. I think there was only a couple of players that had the better of him, and even then he was still able to get to your 90 plus Supercoach points. Not quite crack the 100, but he was still able to post some solid scores even while getting tagged.
Yeah. The second one here we had can Luke Jackson replace Rory Lobb? And I guess we talk about Lloyd Meek as well in that forward line, but also being kind of a second ruckman to Darcy. I'm not sure if you've seen any of the preseason footage. When I did my team reveal, I put up a nice video there of Jackson and Darcy kind of having a ruck battle.
Yeah, so Rory Lobb would go into the middle if Darcy couldn't quite match the athleticism of his opposition ruckman. So I think the ability for them to chop and change, depending on who's in the middle, will be really, really good for how the ball operates out of the middle. As for the forward line, I don't know if Luke Jackson can be a direct replacement for Rory Lobb, but he can definitely contribute to how they cover him.
What's your prediction for, obviously this is a bit more Supercoach based, but what's your prediction for Jackson and Darcy kind of sharing ruck time next year?
I think Darcy is overpriced at what he's come in for for 2023. I think people jumping on him might be a little bit surprised at how middling he may perform with Luke Jackson in the side. I don't think he's going to average 110 plus or anything like that. Jackson and Darcy might both average 90 plus maybe, but neither of them are going to be your ruck one or your forward one sort of candidates.
Yeah, so you don't think he's going to have any of those like monster games like he had in 2022, where he just like dominated it was kind of the solo ruck?
No, I mean, I don't think Darcy will get 80% of the ruck time every single game. There might be some games where Jackson has to go up against a Mark Blitzarves, and so Sean Darcy spends most of the game forward. And when Darcy spends most of the game forward, he might only score 40 to 60 points. But if it's Darcy against someone like a Toby Nankervis or something, that might be a game where he scores 150, and then Jackson only scores about 60 or 60 or 70. So it will come down to whoever they're against and how they manage the ruck line there.
So you guess it's fair to say like more mobile ruckman, Jackson will take a bit more ruck time, and then a more like stronger, tree type ruckman, Darcy will combat that kind of player.
That's what I would predict. Yes.
Okay. The third question I have was kind of around that 5. So obviously we've seen some of the training footage and things like that of him in the preseason. 2 questions: how is he tracking, and where does he kind of fit into the Freo team? Obviously, I wouldn't say Freo surpassed him in 2022, but it felt like the games where he wasn't in the team, it wasn't like North with Ben Cunnington being out. You guys could cover him that way. So how's he tracking? Is he fit, ready to play round 1? And then where does he play in the team next year?
As far as I know, he's ready to go round 1. As far as I know, he's been in full training. Where he fits in the team in 2023 could be anywhere from full forward to the midfield. I think he will chop and change. I think he will be part of that Jager O'Meara sort of rotation. One will be in the midfield while one's up forward. He could even be part of the Jackson sort of rotation as well, because Jackson and Darcy could both spend time at the centre bounce, with Jackson roving to Darcy at some points. So I think his role will be a little bit different and a little bit and probably crafted more to him. Whereas in 2022, he was forward and then he was midfield if the game needed to be broken open, as we saw for the game against St Kilda at about round 16 or 17.
Would you pick him at 319k?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, that's all I wanted to know.
Even if he only averages 90 to 95, is still 200k underpriced.
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of what I've said too, is that he's only got to make a 90 to 95, have one big game in the first 6 or so, and you can offload him later on. So works out that way. All right. Well, thanks, Damo, for coming on the show today and chatting about Freo. Where can people reach you if they want to check out some of your content, that kind of thing?
Everything I write goes on to jockreynolds.com.au. Some stuff is featured on the Herald Sun, but that is usually a free article, so no need to pay any money or sign up for any subscriptions there. Otherwise, I'm on Twitter at DamoSC.
What have you got coming up? I know you're doing some BBL stuff.
Yeah, so we've been covering the Supercoach BBL. We've got trade guides coming out for the Supercoach BBL every round as per the Supercoach schedule. And then we will start to embark on the AFL 2023 Supercoach stuff from January.
Nice. Well, hope you enjoyed, guys, for the Freo review. We'll get on to the other teams as they come. Like, share, and subscribe if you love the content, and we'll see you next time. Bye.